So now, in order to know how did Vietnam got troubles, or the process of the establishment of independence in Vietnam, and later on how the situations have changed and why it took really 3 decades for Vietnam to establish its own independence. Now if you look at the emerging from the shadow of China, as I told you earlier, the countries like Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos are the countries which are under the shadow of China. So they started to slowly emerge out of China. When they were starting to emerging out of China, Vietnam got its independence in 1945, as we discussed earlier. After Vietnam got its independence, it was broken into north and south of China. But prior to this, before Vietnam got its independence also, we have the influence of China more on Vietnam. Vietnam, northern part of Vietnam, and the culture, the political structure, everything was governed by the ideologies, by the principles which are followed in China only. So the influence of China was more on Vietnam, especially on the northern part. But not only this, Vietnam is a land which is connected by water through various parts of the world. So Vietnam has also provided a route to have an excellent maritime trade sea route, through the sea route. It is also known as Silk Route trade. So because of the Silk Route trade, Vietnam is got a well-known or a well-reputed influence in the European countries. European countries know this nation very well because of the connectivity of the waterways. As of modern days, today we have the connectivity by air, connectivity by road. But prior to this, we have only the connectivity by water. So through the water trade, Vietnam was one of the places which was known much to the people of the European countries. So it was a period when the colonization started. It was a period when the colonies, acquiring the colonies was a main target and the task of the newly emerged developing countries of Europe, where because of industrial revolution, they need huge amount of raw materials at very less cost, and they also need a cheap supply of labor, and they also want to sell off their finished products to various long markets to earn huge profits. To satisfy all these requirements, the European countries do need certain colonies. So French was the first country to enter into Vietnam. Vietnam was first stepped in by the French troops in 1856. In 1880s, by the earlier and the middle part of the 1880s, the influence of the French was growing larger and larger day by day. The influence of the country has been going into the control of the French troops. By 1887, Tonkin, a famous city in Vietnam, in the northern part of Vietnam, has been completely occupied by the French people. So in this slow and steady process, French people were able to occupy the Vietnam and brought Vietnam into their control. So in this process, we have to understand here, does Vietnam people do have only Vietnamese population? No, it's a misconception. Vietnam, along with Vietnam, though it is well connected with water, it is also well connected with the hinterland regions through roadways. So as the roadways are well connected, the neighboring countries like Cambodia and Laos, people used to come here and move from here to the other countries. So in this process, we have a population traveling from Cambodia to Vietnam, Vietnam to Laos, Laos to Cambodia. So we also have a group of people coming from Khmer. These people belongs to Cambodia but used to stay in Vietnam. So like that, Vietnam is not having a unique population. Vietnam is also, as equal to the other countries, have a combination of various groups of people living together, various nationalities of people living together. So the initial step of occupying the country or taking over the control of Vietnam was first started by the French people. So looking at the situations, slowly and steadily, people of Vietnam understood the problems which are going to across or in their face of their lives. The Vietnam people understood clearly that the situations which are going on by the occupation of the French army was completely wrong. They are not doing any kind of favor for the Vietnam people. The entire benefits are for the motherland only. In the colonial countries, motherland means the country which has occupied the other countries. So when it comes to Vietnam, the Vietnam's motherland country is French or France. So the France is getting more fruits rather than from the Vietnam. So Vietnam is not just giving a product output for France, but also getting herself like a candle. It is being melting its energy and producing the light for the French people. So one of the blind writer who has observed the situation of France during that time and who was completely dissatisfied with the situations which are going on was the famous writer Mr. Nguyen Dinh Chia. Nguyen Dinh Chiu. Nguyen Dinh Chiu was a well-known famous writer in our Vietnam. He used to speak the Vietnamese language. The one more special characteristic of this person is he is a blind man. So he is a well-known poet plus he is a blind man. Though he was blind, he is writing a poem depicting the situation which is happening in France during that time. What was the situation that he was depicting was, you can understand by his own words that he describes, I would rather face eternal darkness than to see the faces of traitors. So in this line he want to say that he do not want to see anything in the light. He don't want anyone saying that we are going to develop the country, but in the name of saying developing the country, these people are actually spoiling the country, spoiling the population of the country, spoiling the citizens of the country. So he made it very clear that we would like to see rather eternal darkness rather than seeing some of the faces of the triads who are spoiling us, who are irritating us, who are making us to feel pain. And he also mentioned in the other line, I would rather see no man than encountering man's sufferings. She also made it very clear that you don't want to see any man rather than seeing a man who was facing problems. So the writer, though he was blind, Nguyen Dinh Chiu was expressing his deep regrets of what is happening to France actually. So he also told that I would be blind rather than witnessing any nation getting dismembered. So his idea of mentioning his views like this is that he already felt the pain of the Vietnamese people. He already was deeply moved by the situations which are going on. You may get a doubt. How did he come to know? Because he was a blind man. He might have been heard by the people discussing the things what are happening. He might have asked to the people what are their problems. So as he is a well-known person, people would obviously approach him to convey their problems to them. So in this way, he want to portray the problems which are happening in Vietnam on a very simple lines. He mentioned it that I would rather face eternal darkness rather than seeing somebody facing of the faces of the triads. and I would rather see no man than seeing a man who is suffering. He also mentioned very clearly that I would be witnessing nothing rather than witnessing any country getting dismembered by itself. These all situations reveal for us that the people are completely dissatisfied with the French rule. The Vietnamese people are facing a lot of troubles. So what are the troubles that the Vietnamese people are being facing? Before going into the next phase of understanding the Vietnamese troubles, let us have a quick recap of what happened from the emergence of the shadow of China to the occupation of the French people. First of all, the countries which fall under the shadow of China are Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. These three are located in the southeastern region and have a close connectivity with the sea. These are almost the island countries, and these having connectivity with the Indian Ocean. So they are well connected with the countries of West as well as to the European countries. So as they are well connected with the western parts, they have a trade links through the waterways and through the sea route. As they have good connectivity of waterways and sea route, they were able to have a good maritime trade. As they are having good maritime trade and the good Silk Route trade, and Vietnam is known for the trade relations. So these people have decided or had a good understanding of how is a Vietnam. So this trade links brought connection between Vietnam to the France people. So the growing of Vietnam trade has attracted the French people to make Vietnam as a colony. In Vietnam, most of the people depend on agriculture, and they have the next major crop is rubber plantation. Afterwards, they do more on trade. So they want to have good source of raw material for them at very less cost and to have a good market. So they decided to occupy some of the countries in Asia and Africa, which was a scene or a trend which is going on during that period of early part of the 19th century. So first country to initiate this process was England. Later it went on to Germany, Britain. All these countries started in a line and occupy the other countries by naming it as colonization, or they sometimes use the word as civilizing the nations also, because they consider themselves as they are well modernized and well civilized. So they want to teach that civilization skills, teach that capabilities to how to manage yourself to the other countries of Asia and African countries who are uncivilized according to them. So they also use the name like white man's burden or civilizing the other nations, whatever may be the name, but they want to literally occupy the country and use the resources for the benefit of the mother country, but rather than for their own country. So the country will be occupied by some other country and the benefits will be derived from the name of this country to the other countries. So this has been started, and French in 1856 for the first time entered into Vietnam with its troops, and by 1880s the influence of the French started to grow day by day. The northern part of Vietnam, that is by 1887, they were able to occupy one of the important key places in Vietnam, that is Tonkin. So after they occupied these all places, the situations in Vietnam started to turn completely in the opposite direction. Initially they expected that it would be benefiting for the people, that they would get more number of trade opportunities for them with the occupying the lands by the French people. But the situation is turned completely opposite. This we can understand by the writings of one of the famous poets of Vietnam, that is Nguyen Dinh Chieu. Nguyen Dinh Chieu was a blind poet. Though he was a blind poet, he was a famous poet in Vietnam. He expressed his views in the following lines: I would rather face eternal darkness rather than seeing the face of a triads who are bringing troubles for us, and I would rather see no man rather than seeing a man from suffering. I would wish to see not a person rather than seeing a person who is getting sufferings or who is getting pain, and then witnessing anything else. I would be a non-witnessed person rather than being witnessing of a nation getting dismembered. So his intention is very clear. He don't want to be a part of the system where he is not happy. He wants all the people to be happy. So that happiness has been taken away by whom? Obviously by the French people, because the French people have made Vietnam as a colony of the land. So what happened next? How did the people fought against these countries? We'll find out then.
If you like this video, please give a thumbs up. Please subscribe to our channel to get more videos on CBSE syllabus.